If the Bible's got you tied in knots, if you're burdened with religious thoughts, come grab a drink and join the choir. It's Heretic Happy Hour.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Heretic Happy Hour podcast. We are so excited about this episode. We want to just jump right in. My name is Keith Giles. I am one of the three co-hosts of the podcast. I'm the author of several books, including Jesus Unbound, Liberating the Word of God from the Bible. And I am joined by my co-host, Matt and Jamal. Hey, guys. Say hi.
Hi, friends. How are you? This is Jamal. I am the author of Free to Love, and soon to be in just a few weeks here, actually almost a month, April 15th, will be the release of my second book, which will be called Living for a Living. Super excited about that. So, and it's good to be back on the Heretic Happy Hour with you guys.
Yeah, and that means I'm Matthew J. DiStefano, author of Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. Oh, wait, that's not it.
What?
Author of Heretic. I'm on the other side, actually. Yeah. And a couple other books, and soon to be a podcaster, a podcast host of a different show. That doesn't mean I'm leaving you guys, though. So
You're
don't
cheating
worry.
on us. You're cheating on us with another podcast.
Yes. Shots fired. Yeah, excited to be here for yet another episode of the Heretic Happy Hour.
Well, all right. And I also need to make a little disclaimer here. So parents, if you have children in the room, you might want to ask them to leave because we are still in our sex series. And today's episode is going to be about something a little touchy. It's about masturbation.
That's the first time Keith's ever gotten the rusty trombone.
That's the first time, yeah. So I also have to say this episode is sponsored by the Hope Center, a community resource center serving one of Alabama's poorest communities by providing a neighborhood market where neighbors can shop for food at no cost in an atmosphere of love and respect. Please visit their website at servealabama.org for more information.
Guys, this is just my opinion, and I know people may disagree with this, but it's my opinion that a podcast has not arrived until they get a hotline.
I agree.
That's what I hear. Yeah.
And we have a hotline,
of course.
Damn
and
right.
So, that makes the Heretic Happy Hour one of the most unique podcasts in existence today. And so, our number is 240-343-7379. That is the number to the hotline. You can call it 24 hours a day. You can text it. You can, anything you want to say. You can share it. It probably will make the cut, and we will address it at some point, but maybe not. But we'll, just take your chances. But we do have a voicemail that came into the hotline, so can we cue that up?
Hey, this is Reverend Omar in Flowers Cove, Newfoundland. You can look it up on the map. It's way north in Canada, but I'm originally from Brooklyn. And I'm an Anglican priest, by the way. I was listening to your podcast on porn. And while I thought it was actually pretty interesting and informative on one sense, I kind of felt that you guys kind of left it flat on another sense. Because when I was listening to you, I was thinking about the things you were bringing up sound like the same kind of things that evangelicals would bring up. Porn is bad. That porn can be addictive. That, porn is misogynistic. And some of these things are true, but I think that there are also aspects of porn that can be very liberating and enlightening. But anyway, I'm wondering if you guys could talk about that more. But I'm also hoping that when you start talking more about sex, that you're going to talk about the future of sex, robot sex, for example. Gadgets, things like that, virtual reality. Porn isn't going away. Now, the question is, how are we going to deal with it? Or the question I would ask as a minister is, how can it be transformed to something that can be edifying and enlightening? Anyway, love your show. Keep up the good work.
Wow. So, I just got a great idea for a new video channel I'm going to start on YouTube.
What? Robot sex?
Using porn as a ministry. I think he's got a great idea there. That's really cool. No one's ever done that. I mean, I don't think they have.
Well, no. What was that show? I was watching a show on Netflix. It was with Killer Mike, and he uses porn to teach people how to do tasks. So if you want to fix your sink, he's got like two people having sex while giving instructions, and it totally works.
Wow. So, like we could do sort of like a porn version of the 5 spiritual laws or 4 spiritual laws? I forgot how many laws there are. I mean, come on, people would watch it, and you are giving, really important information. But in all seriousness, I know this guy is serious. We're trying to make light of it, but I think, I think it's sort of an opinion, right? I mean, different people have different opinions on pornography. Some people don't feel like there is really much redeeming value to pornography. And I think I'm one of those people. I again, just because I've had such a negative experience with it, and I see it as something to kind of avoid and get away from. I don't want it in my mind or in my life at all. So it's difficult for me to kind of take a step back and say, how can pornography be a good thing? Or how can this, or even to say like the future of sex, like with robots and that kind of a thing. Like, I don't even know what to say about that. I'm sure I know those things are already happening. People sell, sex dolls and that kind of thing that are very realistic and that react and respond and all that stuff. But, I don't know that if we were going to cover that, I think that would have to be a whole nother episode.
Yeah. First of all, I'm impressed that we have listeners in Newfoundland. That's amazing. That's so cool. So I'm glad that the listeners up there, it's one of the places I've always wanted to visit. So I'm sure it's beautiful. But his question, I think, is really interesting about redeeming. What is the redeeming qualities in pornography? What are redeeming? Where is sex going in the future? Sex is super fascinating. Topic. I think for me personally, so much from what I understand. Again, I agree with the caller that porn is not going away in that sense. It's but I can't help but think that the way we approach porn, or I would say we in the typical sense of like how the porn industry is typically viewed or shaped or engaged with, is a direct result of, I believe, how we our fundamental or groundwork assumptions of how we understand sexuality in itself, how we approach sexuality. And I think our topic today that we're going to be talking about has a potential to actually, like, if people like really, if we revisit how do we view sexuality at a very fundamental, basic level, could affect how we engage with anything. And specifically, I think it will affect how people engage with porn or view porn. So I still can't get over the fact that a huge percentage of porn users, at least in North America, tend to be people with religious backgrounds. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure porn is probably more widespread than just in the Bible Belt, but the Bible Belt is a huge consumer of pornography in the way that we know it today. So I happen to think that has to do with, as a reaction to, unconscious views of humanity and sexuality. So I don't know, but I think we could probably talk a little more about that, but we'll get into, when we get into our topic.
Yeah. I just have a quick thing here. I appreciate the voicemail, and I am totally on board with where the caller is coming from. And it's actually funny because I got some shit in the Facebook group, not some shit, but someone was disappointed with how my thoughts on porn. And basically I was like, well, yeah, if it helps build you up, if it helps you with whatever, and it works for you, and it doesn't keep you from having a healthy sexuality, then go for it. And so someone was disappointed by my response on that. And I've actually been getting some more kind of shit online outside the Facebook group for my stance on porn, and not denouncing the porn industry and because it's linked to sex trafficking and all those things. And And I would totally denounce that. But on the same time, I wouldn't go so far as to say porn as such then is bad. So yeah, I would go on the record to say that if porn does edify and does help you become more free sexually or what have you, then you have to evaluate that for yourself. And I think a lot of us are speaking from our personal experiences. And if we've had personal experiences that are poor or that brought us down or what have you, then we're going to speak from that place. So Keith, if you've had a negative experience with porn, you're going to speak from that place.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And that's, we're all going to do that. And as far as like robot sex, it's one of those things like I haven't worked that through yet with my worldview to get to that place. So I guess personally, like I would have nothing to add to the conversation on that. And that's just because I've learned if I'm ignorant on something that it's not time to talk.
So that's good.
That's just me.
Yeah,
personally.
That's good. All right. We have a text, right?
We have a text. Yeah.
Okay. Here's a text. Quote, God listens to your podcast and he definitely disagrees. Ha, but when has that ever stopped good theology? Keep trudging forward, Orthodox heretics.
Well, thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I'm glad.
Although I think God does agree, though. I don't think God disagrees. I think we're obviously on the side of God, right?
Of course.
Well, and a part of the spirit of the Heretic Happy Hour is that you can, God, if you're listening and you disagree, come on the show. That's what we do here on the Heretic Happy Hour. We disagree with each other, and that's cool.
Well, I'm here, guys.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
So God, if you're out there, call the hotline 240-343. Oh, you already have the number.
Now, of course, he knows it. He knows all.
But of course, I don't need to tell you. That's right. So before we get into our Heretic of the Week, just got a couple announcements here. Of course, please bookmark this site, heretichappyhour.com. That's where you can listen to the show. You can find our store. That's basically your landing page for everything Heretic Happy Hour. And I just want to say that we have a Facebook group, and I would love it if more people who actually listen to the podcast join the Facebook group.
That would be great.
Because I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure there's still to this day people who are in the Facebook group who don't listen to the show. So if you're listening to the show and you're not in the Facebook group, just hit that search bar up at the top and look for Heretic Happy Hour. Join the group. Ask the 3 little questions. When you answer those, we'll bring you in. You'll get through the pearly gates of the Facebook group, and then we can have some more discussions about some of the show topics because that's what the group is for.
Yeah, but the group is, in my opinion, I'm just speaking from, I think is lame. Man, it has been driving me insane. And I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with, like, why can't we just carry over? Why can't the Facebook group be about the podcast and carry the same ethos of the podcast? That's just my question. I'm stumped.
Well, because here's why.
So.
Because imagine if everybody in the Facebook group was on this podcast right now and they all had a microphone and all those microphones were turned on. That's kind of what it is, because everyone can talk, everyone can take it a different direction. And so it's chaos, right? And there's always going to be some level of chaos in a Facebook group. I'm sort of okay with some of it. I think I only get upset when 1 or 2 people kind of make it personal and we start getting these arguments and stuff. And anyway, we don't need to air the laundry here on the podcast about the Facebook group. Right. But what we would encourage you is if you are in the Facebook group and you do love the podcast, please help us to keep that a safe place. And as much as possible, keep us on the topics, not on people. And that would be so much better.
Well said. Well said.
Amen, brother.
That's right, brother. And I'm going to take this time to also let you know that we have a Patreon page. So this is for people who are like your Heretic Happy Hour freaks. You listen to this podcast, and as soon as you're done, you're like, I wish I could listen to another 20 minutes. And we got you covered, because if you go to the Patreon page, which is patreon.com/Heretic Happy Hour, you can join at any of the tiers, and then you can get all kinds of like bonus content. We actually record bonus interview content, bonus podcast discussions. We've been posting all kinds of other just extra cool stuff as well to the podcast. We do a webinar once a month that you can join, which is, those, by the way, have been amazing. And you also have access. Yeah, they're so much fun. Yeah, the one we just did was actually my favorite one we ever did. And It was like last weekend.
Mhm.
And anyway, yeah, there's all kinds of cool stuff there. So if you can't get enough of the Heretic Happy Hour, I encourage you to support what we do on the Patreon page, and you will be well rewarded.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
That's right.
Wow. So I believe that we have a heretic of the week.
It's the Heretic of the Week.
Hey, I'm Cindy Wang Brandt, and I am a heretic.
Hi,
Cindy.
Sorry, hilarious.
No, everyone has the same reaction. Don't worry.
Okay.
So, Cindy, hey, this is Matt here. I'm so glad you decided to join us as our Heretic of the Week. If you're not familiar with the show, what we like to ask our guests, the first question we like to ask our guests is why in the world would some people consider you a heretic?
I just had an interaction this morning on Facebook because last night I posted on my page, I said something like, "You are not a sinner. You have not sinned." And people kind of freaked out about that.
Wow.
And I think people think I'm a heretic because I don't really care that much about holding sacred any religious institution. I think of myself as a writer, which means I'm a truth teller. And I feel like I'm just going to tell the truth as I experience it and understand it. And if it upsets people who hold these institutions or rituals as very sacred, then I get it. I can understand that they're upset by it, but I think that's why they consider me a heretic.
Wow, I like you already.
Yeah, right. You fit right in with the show. People love
Yes,
it.
you do.
It actually we had a musician on a bunch of episodes back, Derek Webb, and you mentioned you're a writer. He's a musician, and it's almost like you said the same thing. Like an artist's job is to describe the world around them, or
Right.
a writer's job is to describe the world around them in the most truthful way possible.
Right.
And sometimes that seems to upset people.
Yeah, because the reality is our human experience can't be contained in a doctrine or dogma or anything that's static because we are always changing and we're so dynamic and we evolve. And so anything that's written or enshrined in any sort of, constitution will never be able to catch up with the things that we're doing and changing and learning. It's not to say that we can't have those things. I think it's necessary to live in society in like any sort of cohesive way. But to say that our human story should always trump those institutions, anytime there's like a conflict between our stories and the institution, then we should prioritize the human.
Yeah, I like that idea. I wish more people felt that way. Because I think you're right. Most of our problems stem from loyalty to doctrines, denominations, really systems of institutions and systems of power and control. Mm-hmm. Which if once you have left that, I mean, I was raised in that, that's kind of the whole Christian experience that I had in the beginning was
right.
You enter it sort of with your eyes. You don't really know what you're getting into, right? And then you kind of eventually you realize, oh, wait a minute, this whole thing is sort of about controlling me and my behaviors, and don't think this, don't do this, right? It's very behavior modification stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But in whatever ways you can leave it, once you step outside of it and you can kind of step away from it and look at it and you see it for what it is, then it's like, well, I can never go back to that again.
Yeah, I think Brian McLaren has said on my podcast, he said that the one thing fundamentalists fear the most is chaos. And the thing about holding on to those doctrines is that it makes you feel like you can still control things and that things won't dissolve into chaos. And I think for a lot of us who have maybe moved away from that way of thinking, we realize, first of all, chaos isn't the end of the world. Sometimes things get messy before they get better. And secondly, really, it doesn't get as chaotic as people think. Because if you think about it, lots of people live as secular humanists or atheists or other religions, and they still manage to go to work and go to sleep and have families. It's not as chaotic as, religious gatekeepers would have you fear.
Right.
But don't you think? Now I was going to quickly say that's the ticket right there. That last word you said is fear.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I feel like sometimes, though, even that fear and control that they have, it's an illusion because they're, you sort of say, well, everybody, for example, like, hey, everybody who joins this church has to go through this course, this sort of like new believers class or whatever they call it, new members class. And then you all, at the end of it, will sign a document where you agree with these 10 doctrines, right?
Yeah.
And then we'll baptize you and blah, blah, blah. But see, the thing is, so you've sort of, in an outward way, you've sort of told everybody they're supposed to believe these things to be in the club. But in reality, the majority of people don't really, believe everything that they check the boxes for. Like, well, I believe most of it, but I'm not sure about that or the other thing.
Yeah.
But I'll go along with it, right? I'll pretend because I want to be in the club.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And there's just such a high cost to not being in the club that people will say whatever, do whatever, sign whatever to be in it. But it's so true. And what's sad about that is that you then begin to live double lives because you signed this thing, but you live this one other way. So you have to compartmentalize, like split your personality into the way you behave when you're supposed to behave a certain way. And I just think that's not healthy. It's not healthy to live in this constant split personality.
Right. And a lot of people, I mean, it's untenable as well. So it's not only unhealthy, but the more you go along that road, it seems, at least for a lot of people, that it's very untenable to continue to go down that road, which I suppose brings me to our second question that we like to ask folks is that if you were raised in this sort of church, what was that process like of breaking free from that sort of religiosity? And are there some certain events or doctrines that stood out that you were just like, man, I can't believe this anymore, and this is why?
For me, it was everything. I say I deconstructed in my 30s and I'm 41 now. So I feel like I'm starting to have a few years between my most intense deconstructing years. And the more I am away from it, the less I remember how angsty it was. But if I force myself to remember, it was really, really hard. And it just shows you how effective that religious control is, because I resisted leaving those ideas and that community. So, I mean, do you want me to tell you about why I deconstructed or how I felt while I was deconstructing? Because
do both.
Well, yeah, okay. if you have time to do both, that would be wonderful. Sure. Because I think often the two go kind of together.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I was raised conservative evangelical. I am a missionary convert. So I am born and raised in Taiwan, but I converted into Christianity by Christian missionaries. And so for me, the gospel has always been really wrapped up in this like evangelical machine. And so I was a very successful convert because I was really committed. It's just my personality to kind of go all in. And I actually became a missionary myself. Like I went to Christian college, I went to Wheaton, and I went to seminary, and I became a career missionary. Like, yeah, I was deep into it. And and then I feel like there's a lot of my deconstruction story that's similar to other people, where you just kind of slowly like, okay, I'm a woman and I'm a woman of color, right? So slowly I realized, oh, there's a lot about the system that's not built for me.
Exactly.
Sure. Oh,
yeah.
definitely.
And so as you unpeel those layers, you start to be like, oh, this is not fair. This is not just. This is not right. This is not the gospel.
Right.
And so for me, it was both this gradual kind of unpeeling of all these layers, but I also have a trans brother who came out more than 10 years ago. And this is like before the whole trans conversation is in the public scene. And so that was really jarring experience and dramatic for my personal family life. And so I had both that gradual experience of deconstructing and this really sudden thing that we had to confront as a family. How are we? And it goes back to that human stories over institutions. Am I going to believe my brother that he believes he is a man? Or am I going to care so much about religious doctrine that I reject him? And, I made my choice.
Yeah.
And that's what it's been like. And then it's just been, okay, well, what does it look like to be willing to be honest, to challenge my presuppositions, to realize that I spent much of my formational years in a system that really was toxic in many ways. And then that's the part that it's hard to even talk about without getting emotional, because that was painful. And I faced rejection from my community. And so it was not an easy road. But I think that the reason I'm starting to forget it is because of how free I feel now. And that I can't imagine not having gone through that where I'm at. It's like I feel so much more powerful and liberated and hopeful about the future, because this is just the beginning, right? I feel like I'm reborn in a way, to use evangelical lingo. So I have, I'm doing so much better that I sometimes forget how hard it was to move away from it.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, Cindy, first of all, you're not alone in this kind of story that you're telling. I just want to say thank you, because I think you chose wisely. You chose your own family. You chose your brother. You chose freedom and love. Absolutely. I mean, I think all those things are things that Jesus would say, way to go. That's so much better, but at the same time, like you said, it is painful because unfortunately we do have these connections and relationships that are in the church that, they're not willing to come with us when we say, well, we can't go there. We reach this point in the path where we have to say, well, I can't go any farther than this, or I have to make a choice.
Right.
Well, so where did you go after that? So you went through this painful period of deconstruction. You had to sort of reorient yourself and figure out who you stood with and what you could accept or not accept.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about like where you landed and what did you decide to do after that?
Yeah, I felt like I was kind of in the system, but not of the system for a long time, in terms of still identifying as an evangelical, but kind of disagreeing with everything evangelicalism stood for.
Right.
I sustained myself in that space for far longer than I should have. And again, I think it's because of just how much I was maybe afraid of losing that belonging. But eventually it came to a head. So I was working at a conservative evangelical school, and I posted pictures from a pride parade, and I was asked to stop posting things like that because it goes against their dogma. And so I chose to quit my job, and because I just couldn't, I chose myself. I chose my voice and what I stood for. Right. And
that's
so
that's gangster.
So that was kind of my hard break. And that was the point where I was like, I can't keep identifying as part of the system when they keep pushing me out,
Right.
Like there's at some point where I just have to say, okay, I've really tried, and I just don't belong here. And so, now I kind of identify as an ex-evangelical because I use that label because it still describes that for, 30 some years of my life, that was my world. And so that's still part of who I am, but I'm not part of it anymore. And that's kind of where I am. And so when I was working at the school, I was also starting to write and blog, and I wasn't ready to go full-time writing, but I didn't have a choice, right? It just happened before I was ready. So I just decided to go full-time doing what I do now, which is just content creation, writing books and blogs and podcasting. And so I do this now full time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And I know I've seen some posts on social media about a new book, and we're going to get there. But I feel like I have to take like a really radical turn, because this is a very unique episode that we're going to be talking about. And I know I reached out to you about this, that to see if you're comfortable with talking about this issue.
Mm-hmm.
But this episode's about masturbation.
What?
And I know that's like a radical turn. There's no segue. Like fuck the segue. But
was there a natural progression? Can we just slowly work our way into that?
No.
Well,
we're not
there's really no way to slowly ease into masturbation.
Right. Which is why I thought I would just jump in and just go for it.
Yeah.
Since you're a writer, have you ever written about the topic of masturbation? And if so, what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I have. I wrote about it in my book, actually. So can I talk about my book real fast?
Please do.
Yes, please. I would love to hear that.
Yeah, because it's kind of related to the conversation we're having now. So my story is that I, grew up conservative, kind of went through this deconstruction, and then I had kids. Somewhere in this timeline, I had children. And so when you have kids, all of a sudden this deconstruction process becomes very practical and personal, because you have to pass on your faith to these tiny humans. And you're going through this confusing process that's kind of messing you up in all kinds of ways, while you still have the responsibility of a parent. And so I started like a Facebook group called Raising Children Unfundamentalists, basically saying, hey, how do we do this? How do we share our faith with the next generation when we don't even know what we believe anymore? What are the values that we care about? How should we do this thing? And so that's where my book comes from. My book is called Parenting Forward. So it's kind of like the next phase of the evolution. Like, okay, now that we've gone through deconstruction or going through it, how do we move forward? How do we raise the next generation? How do we pass on a legacy of our faith? And so in my book, I kind of lay out my new values, right? I believe that we should raise our children with a lot more autonomy than I was raised in, with all the religious control that we talked about. And I talk about sexual identity and sexual orientation and just sex in general, because that was actually a huge part of the system that we were brought up in. Like, I think we're familiar with the term purity culture. Where it's like abstinence only, and just a lot of shame involved in sex and pleasure and masturbation. And so in my book, I just briefly touch on it, but I want to give agency back to children. And I think a lot of sexual agency is understanding desire, understanding your own desires. Excuse me. Understanding your own desires and pleasure, which I feel like masturbation can help you understand yourself more. And so I believe in stripping shame away from boys. I think boys are shamed for masturbating. Yeah. Girls are shamed for other things. But so I do want to kind of take the stigma away. And I mean, there's still conversation to be had about like privacy and, moderation and all these things when it comes to like a parent and a child conversation. But I do believe in stripping the shame away from all of those conversations.
Yeah.
Because I actually just listened to a podcast about porn. And again, I think that porn is one of those things where like fundamentalists are very, very afraid of, because they're afraid of chaos. Well, anyway, I won't get into the whole subject of porn unless you want to, but listening to that podcast about porn, they just kind of interviewed all these different kinds of people. I realized just how different people are. Like, some people are impacted by porn in different ways. Some people have different like ethical standards applied to porn. So I just think that the purity culture does not address the diversity of human beings and our sexuality. Like, it just is too binary. It's too restricted. We're so much more beautifully diverse than that way of teaching.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with everything that you said, except for one thing. And the first thing, I'm glad you mentioned porn, because that's where I'm at. It's like for all the negative that the porn industry is, and for all the negative that that porn can be,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't then go so far as to say like it's bad as such. Just like let's say the drug industry causes a lot of problems. Why does it cause problems? Well, because of X, Y, and Z. It's not necessarily that all quote unquote drugs are bad. So
Right.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. There is one thing I think I would want to, and I'll ask you this just to maybe have you clarify, is that you emphasize that masturbation is especially men or boys are especially shamed for masturbating. And I guess I would sort of I agree with that. Like I had every young man's battle, and I was told like the solution to not masturbating is don't masturbate. And it
Well,
didn't
I
work.
think we were told that
Like,
girls just don't masturbate.
Right. No,
Which is
exactly.
Well,
It was
no, and that-
it was just ignored.
And
right?
that was
Right.
yeah, and that was going to lead to my question is that, well, it's just ignored, or it's said that girls don't masturbate. But I think that if they did, it would be even more especially shamed because it would be so taboo.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and maybe if I can get your thoughts on that, like I think that's where the purity culture especially shames women, is that if they did act like boys, let's say, in that sort of like stereotype, they would be then even shamed, but like shamed on steroids.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You're right. I think it just was like we just don't, it's so shame that we didn't even talk about it. But yes, I think we were definitely raised to feel like girls don't have any sexual desire.
Sure.
So that's just simply untrue.
Yeah. Well, I really like where you're going with it, Cindy, because it's like, like how much better would it be? And I'm sure your book goes into this. So maybe you can elaborate on this a little bit, but by simply just speaking to our children, about their sexuality and masturbation, if we treated it like no big deal, then guess what? It probably wouldn't be a big deal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Seriously, once you step out of that purity culture, things are not as complicated as people think it is, nor as scary. You know, there's a lot of research. There's a lot of people who are doing work that are reasonable and that help us inform these conversations. I want us to be able to have reasonable conversations and nuanced conversations that can include the complexity of everyone's individual sexuality. And I really, again, want to emphasize giving our kids, our teenagers, the agency to kind of determine their sexual ethic. Like that's all that matters. It's like, it doesn't matter how much you have a sexual ethic you want to apply to your kids. They're going to kind of do what they want. I think we see this even in conservative evangelical families. It's like teenagers are having sex no matter how much abstinence teaching you're giving them.
Right.
And so why not then just openly say, okay, listen, we know you're going to determine for yourself. Let us help you understand the tools and the information and the power to decide how you want to live your life and your sex life.
Yeah. But see, here's the thing. We've known for probably at least a decade or two now that, I mean, the research is there, that if you want to cut down on teen pregnancy, if you want to cut down on STDs, if you want to cut down even on abortions, then the way to do that is sex education and provide young people with contraceptives.
Contraception.
This just makes too much sense because most Christians are like, oh, no, we can't do that. But yet we still want to say, Christians still want to say we're against abortion, we're against sex, we're against, all these other things that are the byproduct. But we're refusing the common sense solutions that are right in front of us. It's like we can't let ourselves go there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
I don't know what to say. All I know is I think those of us who do see it for how reasonable it is needs to just keep insisting.
That's
Otherwise we're just going to be gaslit Like,
Yep.
don't be gaslit. Speak the truth. Like, this is the truth. This makes sense. This is what we should do.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know what else to do except to just say what I know to be true.
Right.
Just keep on keeping on. That's all you can do. So as we wrap up here, Cindy,
Mhm.
what are you doing? Because I know you got a book out, and what is the title of that? Where can people get a hold of that? Because I haven't read it myself, but I'm going to tell you, my wife and I are going to read it together, and I look forward to it. So, and I've heard great things. So where can people get in touch with you and get a hold of this book?
Yeah, I mean, my book is sold wherever books are sold: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any bookstore. It's called Parenting Forward: How to Raise Your Children with Justice, Mercy, and Kindness. You can also find all of my work. I also have a podcast by the same name, Parenting Forward, but you can find all of that information on my website, cindywongbrandt.com. And I also just kind of want to plug my Facebook group, which is called Raising Children Unfundamentalists. If anyone is interested in having these discussions further, you're welcome to join my group there.
Awesome. Wow. Cindy, this was awesome.
Great. I'm in that group. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, super. This has been really great. Cindy, thank you so much for talking with us and sharing your story as well as your ideas in the book, which I'm also looking forward to learning more about. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks. Peace out. Jamal, where were you? You were
I was just agreeing. I was like shaking my head,
There's a lot of nodding. Yeah.
Nodding. Yeah. Yeah. It's fantastic.
That doesn't come through on the mic though.
Oh, dang it. Okay. I'm gonna have to make some changes.
Is there a reason you weren't on the show? Do you have like some big event coming up soon? Or actually by the time this is released, already had the big event maybe?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, yes, I am. Well, by the time, like as of recording, as of today and last night when we had the interview, I was thick up to my waist in preparation with wedding planning because I'm getting married really soon. I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, all congratulations.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So you're not going to have to masturbate anymore.
Oh, wow.
Did you like that? Did you like that segue?
Wow, that was,
come on,
Matt. That was like a pro, man. That was professional right there. But
I couldn't help myself. I'm sorry. I apologize. Forgive me, Father. Forgive me for I have sinned.
Wow. No, actually, that's a great segue into our topic of the day, which is really all about masturbation. And I personally, I just think that this is a topic that I just feel like masturbation as a topic. First of all, it's either joked about, in culture and society, it's treated very, like it's a joke, or it's treated shameful. So I think there's a mix. There's a level of shame that's interjected into the entire topic. And so, what do you do with shame? Humor is a way to make something a little bit more lighthearted, or avoidance altogether, especially in the Christian world. I mean, there's no discussion about it other than how wrong it is. But what's interesting is that almost universally all human beings have experience with masturbation. All the studies point to that. If you meet somebody who has not had experience with masturbation, you're talking to a rare individual.
Or a liar.
I mean,
or a liar. I was just about to say that.
So something that affects that so many people have, has been affected by. I just feel like, gosh, if it's so universally experienced, why is it so difficult to have conversation about this topic?
I think it's the inherent shamefulness of it, right? I think it's because there is, it's just something that happens that we all do it, but we don't brag about it. We're like, hey, sorry, I'm late. I was tossing off in the bathroom. Like we don't.
I think we should do
maybe
that.
we should do more of that. Well, I will say, I think that that's one thing I really liked about what Cindy was saying in the interview. From a parental perspective, if we don't make a big deal about it with our kids, then maybe they won't make a big deal about it either, right? And so I think if we could ever maybe reach the point in our society, in our culture, and in our communities where we don't make a big deal about it, where we don't attribute shame to it, then we could reach a point where it isn't a big deal, and maybe then we could talk about it, in a way that would be like, we could actually just acknowledge it and move on.
Mm-hmm.
No, I love when Cindy was saying that. I was thinking of a different topic, but cussing. Like in my house, we don't obviously make a big deal of cussing because I cuss like a sailor. But my daughter is 8 and she doesn't see it as a big deal, and it's never once been a problem. And sometimes she does say shit, like she said bullshit once in the perfect context, and it was hilarious. But in school, we don't get calls from home, or we don't get talks with the teacher, or in her dance studio. We never hear anything like that. But on the flip side, like I was told cussing was really bad, and I was always told not to cuss. And when I was a kid, I didn't cuss, and see how I turned out. So I think yeah, when we make something a huge deal, like we turn it into this weird thing that we feel ashamed about, So if we're shaming masturbation and we're telling people not to do it, read this book and this will help you not do it. Well, when we do it, all we're going to feel is that burden of guilt and shame. And if we just made it not a huge issue and just talked about it, I don't know, maturely, and not just say like the end all be all is making something taboo, because it's not and it doesn't work. So if you didn't want people to masturbate, and I'm not saying this should be my advice, but if you didn't want people to masturbate, you wouldn't make it such a huge deal. And we make it a huge deal in the religious world, the Christian world. But then I would say that masturbation is a total normal thing that everyone does, and it's been shown to be quite healthy, actually. I mean,
Well,
yeah, I saw that.
Well,
coming,
can we
but
talk
that's okay.
about that a little bit, Matt? I mean, I know you probably don't have a stack of statistics or a Harvard study or something in front of you, but just in general, can we talk about like what are the positive effects or impact of masturbation?
Well, I think it releases endorphins and all those good hormones. And I mean, I'll just speak anecdotally and say that, like, if I'm feeling stressed or bottled up, to be punny, if I masturbate and then I'm writing or something, like I don't have that stress or pent up rage, I'll call it. So this is just anecdotal, and it helps you get through your day. You don't have to worry. You don't have to have that. I'm not a teenage boy, so I'm not waking up with a boner every day like teenage boys do, and it doesn't go away. We've probably all had those experiences. Like, what do I do with this? How am I supposed to go throughout my day? But even as an adult, like it still helps get your mind off that sort of like pent upness. That's not a word, but it is now. And so it just helps free you up to do the things that you need to do without having that like looming over you. I don't know. It just helps me. It helps me relax. It helps me not be stressed out.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that is, there have been studies about that. And just from a purely, emotional, biological, psychological standpoint, minus the shame, right? So once you add shame to it, then no, it isn't healthy, because then you get the benefit physically, you get the benefit psychologically, but that lasts for a few seconds before the guilt and the shame come in, and now you're
What have I
so then
done?
actually then it becomes a negative thing. So, but if we can remove the guilt and the shame from it, then it does become something where it's like, look, I feel this pressure, I have to relieve it, or whatever the reasons are, right? Then you just take care of it and you move on with your life. And if you can do that, then yes, there are plenty of positive benefits of that. And but unfortunately, I think it really, to me, it comes back down to the guilt and the shame part of it, where, and again, we have to point the finger at, especially here in the West, with evangelical Christianity, right? Mainline Christians, pretty much across the board, have this stigma and attitude attached that if you do that, if you masturbate, you're kind of a sick, twisted, person, and you need to stop doing that. and you need some help, rather than, no, you're a human being. And this is just one of the things that human beings do as a normal behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah. You need some help from a pastor who's
Exactly.
probably beaten off. I mean, come on.
Well,
But please wash your hands
silly.
when you're done.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, man.
You got
This is
two
a
on one
record, this is a
episode.
record.
Oh my God.
I think,
Slacking.
here's a thought, and this is something that's actually really bothered me. And, I found myself bothered by this, and I don't know if I had words for it until, doing more thinking as an adult on the topic. But even going back to my childhood, there was something that felt really wrong about the way society, even understands and refers to, or like our body parts, specifically our genitals. So, for example, I think, and again, not to be nitpicky, or I'm not trying to be, come at this from a judgmental place, but there's just something that feels dishonoring. Like, I don't know. I think about when I think of the way I'm approaching this, our bodies are, I really feel this way. I really believe this way. Our bodies are sacred because we are sacred beings. I believe that we are these divine beings, having a human experience. We're spiritual in nature. And so like our physical bodies are manifestations of our spiritual nature. Like, so and that's the idea that everything, even the physical world, is representative of, if everything, again, going back to, this concept that Christ, that everything, the material world is the manifestation of Christ, then, man, everything that we're talking about, material matter itself, is a reflection or manifesting some quality of the divine. So our bodies are very sacred. They are expressions of our consciousness, and so our genitals are a part of that. So, like, one of the things in the East, in the Eastern, in India, the Sanskrit was the root of the Indian languages, but in the Sanskrit, the word for penis is actually, and this is not to be funny, but this is actually the meaning of the Sanskrit word for penis is wand of light. Is actually how it's referred to. I mean, it's serious though.
I'm totally using that.
But it's true,
totally
though. It's true.
that.
So the idea behind that, though, is like, hey, this is actually an instrument of light. This is actually an instrument of love. So to approach, so in the West, though, and maybe not just the West, but why is it that our genitals are used for such derogatory, like, nicknames for our genitals are used to actually describe negative things? So, for example, like the female genital, for vagina is like, the slang term is, is used to.
It's the yoni.
Well, that's I think an honoring word, but like the way it's typical.
No, I know. Yeah,
but the
right.
typical word that's used in our culture, is, we call people, at least in male constructs, you'd call somebody a pussy because if they're weak, because they're like, they don't have, strength or whatever. And it's like, wait a minute, how does the female genital get to be representative of something that's weak or something that's, what? Because it's like
right.
that.
You ever been hitting the balls? We should flip that whole thing.
Yeah, this is turning into a vagina monologue. I mean, because the
yeah, and you guys probably know Betty White. She was one of the Golden Girls on TV.
Oh, yeah.
There's a quote attributed to her.
Golden Girl.
She says, "Why do people say grow some balls? Balls are weak and sensitive. If you want to be tough, grow a vagina. Those things can take a pounding." It's just a quote from Betty White. But seriously, though, like that's always been when I hear it, it just something inside me cringes. And the same thing for the male anatomy. We're talking about a penis. Like, why is it referred to in such a derogatory way? You call somebody basically you call somebody who's an asshole or is acting like an asshole, you call them a dick. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Are we really so how is it that the penis has come to mean such a derogatory thing, it's a symbol of aggression, or it's a symbol of it's again, how we refer. I know it's like people aren't consciously thinking of these things when they're using this language, but I just feel like there's got to be a way. as we're educating, especially as children, as we're coming to learn about our own bodies, that we're seeing our genitals as sacred, not as these profane, shameful things, and even how we talk about them. It's like, wow, we really, the way we talk about our bodies or our private parts are so, I think it's revealing as a culture of actually some deep seated ways we're viewing ourselves. So, again, our as human beings, we're not born with a robust sexuality in the sense of that we feel that we're operating in it. This is something that matures with age. So obviously, as you're getting older, your sexuality is budding, and you're actually going to experience sexual feelings in your body. And how we understand that is a process. It should not be, okay, as children, you don't even talk about it. And then suddenly in adolescence, it's like shamed, or it's not even discussed. It's like, I don't, and then we're expected to go right into adulthood and having a sexually active life without baggage. It's like, no, how we nurture and blossom children's sexuality is so vitally important. And I think it starts with how we refer to our genitals. Like, how do we actually understand them? What's the purpose of them?
The answer is to use the term wand of light.
Sure. Well, it's funny because you were talking, Jamal. It was making me think of 1 Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 12 or whatever, where Paul he's talking about the church and using the metaphor of a body. And he talks about the sort of the unseemly parts are the ones we should give more honor to. And I know he's using this as a metaphor for the church, but yet there's an application there where he's actually, Paul in that passage is actually kind of saying what you're saying, is that the parts of the body that we tend to, we want to say, oh, we got to cover that up. I'm embarrassed by that. No, we should give more honor to those. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. That is interesting. That's a great point, Keith. What if as we are coming to understand our bodies, we actually think of our genitals as a body part that you honor as sacred? Like, is that even, what would that conversation even be like?
Yeah.
Like, because so much, and also there's a lot of fear. First of all, there's been a lot of abuse, sexual abuse, and there's a lot of fear around that. So, children are often educated about their genitals as privates, and like, these are things you don't, these are privates, but a lot of it is based around like, hey, no one should touch you, and that kind of thing, which is totally understandable and important because of all the abuse that's gone on. But if all the conversation around our body parts is, hey, this is private, this is like, it's almost like this idea of, it's kind of like hidden behind this thing of like, no, that's just a private part. Here's what you don't do with this, and here's what people aren't allowed to do, which is totally understandable. But like, is there a way to educate children, even in the way from the very beginning, how you refer to your genitals as like this is just like all parts of our body, but this is actually a sacred part of you that, as you grow older and move into adulthood, is going to be a very powerful part of your life.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you guys. Have either of you ever been caught jerking it? I love my awkward segue.
That was the perfect segue there. Well, I don't know, Jamal or Matt, have you guys ever been caught in the act?
I haven't actually.
No, I haven't.
And which is surprising for as much as I've done it.
So actually, I have been, and so I guess I'm going to tell my story. It's not that exciting, but but I'm going to come on out here and confess. So when I was in, when I was kind of hit puberty, before I tell you the getting caught story, I'm just going to tell this little how I just even discovered, hey, there's this thing that my penis does more than pee. I had an erection. Probably, I think I'd had them before, but at this time I had one, and it felt really good. I was like, man, it feels really, really good. And so I was in my room, right? And then, then I ejaculated, and it scared the crap out of me, because I was like, what is this thing? Like, no one ever told me anything at all. I didn't even know what had just happened. But then it's like, well, do I tell my parents about it? Because do I need to go to the doctor? I just had no idea. And this is before the internet, so I couldn't look it up or even, in some way just even find out what just came out of my penis. And, is that normal? Is that a normal thing?
Is that what you would have Googled?
What? Dear Google, what just came out of my penis?
What just happened?
Well, no, but I'm not kidding you. I mean, that's what I was thinking. Like, I was kind of scared and freaked out, but I had no one to talk to. I didn't have any brothers or sisters either, right? So it's just me. And I'm sure as hell not going to mention this to my friends at school. So anyway, then like a few days later, I did it again. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is kind of normal. So then, then I kind of got into that. And it was probably a few months later, and then I was in the bathroom. This is so bad. I was in the bathroom and I was, I was masturbating. And I thought, the doors were locked and I was fine. And my parents would assume I was, just going to the toilet.
Rookie mistake.
Yeah. But here's the thing so at the time my parents and I, we lived in a trailer, like a mobile home. And the bathroom, there was only one bathroom. It was a pretty big master bathroom. But to get to my parents' bedroom, you kind of had to go through the bathroom because their bedroom was in the very back of the mobile home. And as I was like right there doing that, my dad walked right through. And this is the oddest thing about it. So I freeze, right? Because like I'm caught. I'm like, oh crap! And my dad just walks right by me, goes into his bedroom, gets whatever it was he needed, and walked out and shut the door. He didn't say a word, and he never mentioned it to me.
Wow,
that's gangsta.
Yeah.
Wow. Keith, first of all, thank you for sharing that. That's a vulnerable story. But that's seriously though. I think a lot of people have this experience, and what you're describing though is super interesting because it so from your not to knock on your parents or anything like that, but honestly, it is. I think when I was like a early teenage years, and I think I started to get into masturbation, but and of course I've read things where like parents are like, well, my teenage son is taking longer showers and spending much more time, in the bathroom, that kind of thing. I think my mom made reference to that one time, like taking awful long in there. And she had the look on her face was like not typical. So it was like, oh, okay. And she's alluding to something. And I felt instantly, I just felt shame. So it's but that's it. There's how do we, like, there's no tools, no talk. It's like, we can't talk about this. We can't go there. It just communicated like, this is so shameful. We can't even, like, for example, if you were snorting a line of Coke and your dad walks in, probably he's going to address it.
Probably. Yeah.
Or if it's anything,
right. Give me that. Where'd you get that?
Well, just depending on your situation at home, but like, it's, yeah, exactly. But it's like, of course, that's a very negative example of like, okay, that we have to address this, but this is like, so it's viewed in such a negative way, but it triggers people's own internal sense of shame. A parent, like, first of all, your dad probably understands what masturbation is, but it's almost like it's so shameful. It's like, I can't even talk about this. But I wonder, and also I remember having a friend, she grew up in a very strict religious, home, and very not a healthy, like very fundamentalist kind of thing. And when she got her period, around 10, 11 years old or whatever, they like, her parents actually made fun of her. Like, her mother really shamed her.
You're kidding.
Yeah, like kind of had these comments, almost like a derogatory, just a way to, and she felt very dirty about it, of course. And that is also very revealing of how we view our humanity and our sexuality and different things. So but I also have heard the opposite. So like my fiance, when she got her period, she talks about this, like, I think they celebrated it. I think they might've went out to eat. Like, it was like a mark of celebration. Like, okay, you're entering, you've just crossed into a milestone. It's kind of like this rite of passage where you're now, it's a sign that you're growing up and you're maturing and your body's actually doing what it's what's designed to do. And, it's, and I wonder, like, as men, and just speaking, from the male, because and again, masturbation is mistakenly commonly seen as just a male issue. It's not. Women masturbate almost as much as men do in a lot of the studies. But it is seen though as a male thing. But I wonder if it's if we're not missing an opportunity, and maybe this is another conversation, but how, like a rite of passage, what if, I mean, because men are, as you're moving from boyhood into manhood, there's a transition, you're transitioning, it's not overnight, but a hallmark, a mark of like moving into this is like, the first time, I know this might sound crazy, but like, what if the first time a boy masturbates, that could actually,
you go to,
like be prepared for, like, because, before a girl gets her period, it's talked about like, hey, this is probably going to happen to your body in a healthy way. It's like preparing the girl. There's going to be a day when this happens, and I don't want you to be, freaked out. But like for you, Keith, like, it's like, this just happened. Am I dying? Is this crazy?
No,
like no one ever told you about this.
So we should go to dinner. Like if the first time we masturbate, we come out, we're like, hey, can we go to dinner now?
No, but I really like the spirit of what you're saying, Jamal. Like, what if it's,
No, I know. I'm just messing
If we had a culture where, like, for example, let's suppose that I had the courage to do that, or even, well, to back it up, what would have been better is if my parents knew, had been proactive and said, okay, we can see Keith is, he's starting to grow some hair and his body's changing and he's probably going to move into the stage very soon. Let's let him know that these things are going to happen to him, and let him know that if these things happen, he should let us know, and that we're here. We're going to affirm this is a very natural thing. Then I would have told them, hey, this thing happened to me, and I would have felt safe communicating that to them. And then if their reaction was something like, oh, that's awesome. Wow, Keith, you're becoming a man. This is a beautiful thing, right? This is a normal thing. We should celebrate the fact that your body is behaving the way God designed it to behave. And then, why not? Let's go out to dinner. Let's celebrate. You're becoming an adult. You're becoming a man. How much more affirming and beautiful would that be? Like, that's awesome.
Well, yeah. And you're also I think you're preparing for a healthy sex life in the adulthood, because so much and a lot of sex therapists have talked about like how the unconscious views towards like, okay, so if you as a teenage boy are like viewing orgasm behind a closet of shame, and you got to kind of do this really quick to get this over with because it's such a shameful act. Well, that doesn't just turn off like your unconscious views towards that. So like how, like what if you're just to understand, hey, what you're experiencing in your body is for the purpose of connection. It's for the purpose of love. So like you can be thankful for your body. You can like feel your own heart as you're going through this experience. Like you can connect to yourself, because eventually when you get into adulthood and into relationship, like this is like this whole sexual act is a way to serve and honor and bring love. And so like if the beginnings of it are clouded in such shame, I just can't help but think that how much does this lead to a shadow side of sexuality, which I think a lot of the pornography industry is, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
And then like, how does that affect us in our relationships and going into marriage and things like that? So what if it could be celebrated? Like, hey, what would it look for a man to celebrate his son as he's going through this transition period, or mothers celebrating their sons as well. You know what I mean? Like, and again, this is not just, I'm speaking from a male perspective, but like women, this is also something that affects, maybe not to the same degree because physiology is a little bit different, but women do masturbate and masturbate from very young age. And so that needs to be, we just need a real way to, because this is such the beginnings of our sexuality. If it's covered in shame, it's really hard to get out of that.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. I think it would be a beautiful thing if we really did have, if we even as a culture just, if we saw it and treated these kind of physiological changes in young people as they were entering puberty, if we communicated to them, this is normal, this is natural, we're going to celebrate this. This is because as parents, for example, you understand that this is the way that I'm going to have grandchildren one day, right? This is, in other words, this is a celebration of life. This is a celebration of good things that are coming, good, healthy, natural, beautiful things that are coming in the future of our child. And we should celebrate all of that because all of it is worth celebrating. And look, let's be really honest, especially as Christians. Don't we think God created all of that? Didn't God intend all of this to be something that was pleasurable and good and normal and healthy? So why are we attaching shame to parts of that? That is like so stupid.
Well, I think it comes down to how do we view our humanity?
Yeah.
Are we good people or are we shameful, sinful, dirty people? And that's the ultimate,
We're wretched
Yeah,
worms. We're wretched worms. And if you masturbate, you're a wretched
Well,
worm.
Richard Rohr said, if you begin with a negative anthropology, you end with a negative anthropology. It doesn't matter how much God loves you in the middle of it, you put. Yep. So and maybe we could say that about our sexuality, though. If it begins negative and shame, how do you kind of like, it's hard to get out of that unless you reframe the entire understanding of sexuality, not from a place of shame, but from a place of honor.
Yeah, I like that.
And again, I think the conversation of like how we talk about our bodies is so body parts, sexual organs, all of that from the very beginning should be reframed. My understanding of that, my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, that was fun. This is a good episode. I'm glad we did. I'm glad we did this one. I think we almost didn't, but I'm glad we did.
Yeah, me too.
Me three.
I think it's helpful to have these dialogues. Yeah, you three.
It is.
So, on second thought, parents, go ahead and let your kids listen to this episode, because you do need to listen to this with your kids and talk to your kids about everything we just talked about.
That's a good point. This is very true.
Or at least talk to them, yeah.